So let's talk about like where you're at. So you did this contest prep, or you're in the middle of a fat loss phase. Are you getting ready for a contest? Because I know this is around the season.
I got shredded, but then I realized there was a WMBF competition 3 months out, and I'm like, there's no way I can maintain this state. So I just started eating normally again and have rebounded since. I'm still lean, but I would need to do another 3 month cut in order to be ready. And now that competition's already out of the way. So I mostly did it for social media this time, which I said I wasn't going to do, but I did release an awesome transformation video, and I proved that I gained another 5 pounds or so of muscle, or at least I learned how to better keep my size on the way down. Because I think that's what happens each time you shred. It's not that your bulk was that much better, it's that you learn how to diet better. So that's the distinction here. I also wanted to see, like, could I do this on a vegan diet? Could I surpass my all-time best physique of last year? And the answer was yes. My measurements were higher, my lean body mass, like I didn't think I could look that good. And now I'm bulking back up, and this is the strongest I've ever been pound for pound at this particular body weight. So the plant-based diet has served me well, and it was even easier to get shredded eating that way.
Okay, so let's dive into that a little bit because last time we spoke, you were transitioning, I believe so, into the plant-based diet, but you were off-season mode. You were in full
That's
bear
right.
mode, as you would call it, right? I have that right, right? Full bear mode?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So doing that as in a fat loss phase, talk about some of the challenges, if there were any. You mentioned it was actually easier. So, but did that take some adjustment to get used to that, and then it became easier?
No,
Like, okay.
the thing is, I've done plant-based before, and I've always kind of been that way, like around 80% or so, but I hadn't gone all the way. So this was simply replacing some of the animal products with just whole plant foods. Quite simply, first of all, you don't need that much protein. People think they do, but just for reference, last year I was consuming about 220 grams of protein a day, which was far too excessive. I was having egg whites, Greek yogurt, and horse meat, believe it or not. So my diet was based off that, and I was consuming it every day. And I thought you had to have all this protein to keep your muscle on the way down, especially as you approach single digit comp status. This time I took a different approach because there was a lot of new data coming out saying that you probably don't need as much as you think you do. I support the evidence when it comes to nutrition. I think with lifting, it's a little bit different because they tend to use a lot of noobs. But when we talk about biomarkers of health, there's a lot of cause and effect relationships that we've established over many decades. And I don't claim to be smarter than these nutritional experts. So I follow their advice. And so I tried a lower protein approach, quote unquote. I was calculating every day using the app Macro Factor, getting around 120 grams a day. And what I noticed was absolutely zero difference in strength or maintenance of size. Now, you could say, well, it's because your body weight is lower, right? So if you plug it in, let's say zero point 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight, you still hit it. Or if it wasn't optimal, you're slightly under optimal, right? Which is a valid point, but it still goes to show that, first of all, a lot of us are carrying a lot more fat than we realize. So if you got comp ready, you probably weigh the same as me anyway. Like I believe Alberto Nunez weighs 160 on stage at 5'11. Is that how tall he is?
Actually, 5'9" or 10. He likes to go shorter, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that too. A lot of guys are shorter than they claim they are. And in competition, they will freaking measure you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So people freak out like, what? You're 155? Well, you get shredded and you'll see that you probably weigh the same, if not less. And so if we
Mhm.
base it off lean body mass, not just our absolute weight when we're bulked up, yeah, you really don't need that much protein because that's what it's based off. It doesn't account for the fat on top of it. And so 120 grams was more than enough for me. And just eating regular foods, like you have a block of tofu a day, you have your beans every day. I mean, you're hitting your numbers without even trying. And then if you're really stuck, you literally just have a scoop or two of protein powder, and it's a done deal. And you can have that with your meal or separate, and it's a joke. So I didn't find any issues with that. And then the other thing is your micronutrients, because you're consuming whole plant foods, they end up through the roof, man. I was getting 80 grams of fiber a day on 1800 calories, 1850, which is absurd. There's guys who are consuming 3000 calories and they're struggling to get 50 grams of fiber. So when you replace all these animal foods with whole plant foods that are rich in micros, you get your fiber and you get all your vitamins and minerals, even in a calorie deficit. And so your energy is higher. You're also going to have higher carbs by default. So you're fuller and you don't feel lethargic throughout the day. So you can push it more on the cardio. Your NEAT is elevated and your work capacity doesn't suffer in the gym. And so I think that's why I was able to preserve more mass. I just had all kinds of energy. And I only started getting tired at the very end, like literally the last 2 weeks. And it wasn't by a significant amount because in the previous year, I was unable to even go for jogs. I had a difficult time walking. I felt like the bench press was easier of all things. But this time I was doing
Wow.
cardio twice a day, literally going for an hour run, and not getting gassed out. And the thing is, with the plant based diet, your arteries, man, like it does something to you. You're supple. You don't get out of breath. Everything is like flowing. If you catch my drift, that allows you to push it on the cardio.
Well, first off, I think this is going to be eye-opening for a lot of those tuning in, especially those who consume meat, by the way, who think that they need to be hitting these large amounts of protein relative to their lean body mass. So, like, if someone's weighing 160 pounds, lean, shredded on stage, and they're consuming
Exactly.
like 200 grams of protein, and a lot of that's coming from meat sources as well, and that's eye-opening to know that you did it without that, and you were under 1 gram per lean body mass,
Yeah.
and you're not even consuming the types of proteins that many bodybuilders think
The,
that they absolutely need to in order to get in this tip-top shape, right? So that's
yeah.
like,
The less bioavailable forms, quote unquote, right?
yes.
In an
Wow.
amount that's suboptimal while shredded, while in a deficit. You would think this combination doesn't make sense, and yet I had the greatest success ever in terms of
Right.
preserving my mass and strength. I didn't think it was
Wow.
possible, bro. Like I thought for sure there was gonna be some downsides, but at this point, like I'm totally sold. And that's
Holy
why I'm not
smokes.
gonna stop,
Yeah, yeah,
including on the way
absolutely.
up. I'm bulking right now. I'm consuming about the same amount of protein. If it's higher, it's just because my calories are higher,
Or
but I
higher.
don't care about it.
When did you transition out of this fat loss phase? How long ago was that?
Oh, it was 2.5 months ago, maybe three. I get
Two and a
lost
half.
with time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow, has it been that? It's already been a few months, eh? Dang, it would have been cool if you timed it well for. I know it was for social media, but
I
that would
know,
have been
man,
kind of
but
cool to.
it's
Yeah,
my issue as well. I don't like being shredded because my numbers go to hell, quote unquote. Now, I
right.
was still able to bench 3 plates, but to me, that's unacceptable because in my bulk, which was not even a year ago, I was doing 3 plates for 10 reps. So my 10 rep max became my 1 rep max.
Oh,
It's very hard for me psychologically. Even though I actually felt quite good, I didn't like being weak. And also, you float in clothes. My
yeah.
t-shirts were actually quite good, but the pants, man, you look like you have chicken legs practically, or at least the waist. You got to wear a belt, have maxed out tightness. So I
Well,
think I value being a little bit stronger.
no, I hear you, man. At the end of the day, that's why we all got into this. It wasn't for
It wasn't
the
to be
I
scrawny,
think. I think, yeah, exactly, right? I think a lot can relate to that. But also, most people have two wardrobes, man. Like the bodybuilders, they'll have a cutting
Yeah,
wardrobe
for
and a
sure.
bulking one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that
Well,
might be
look,
the
now
next
there's
stage,
some
man.
Well, look, there's some pants I can't wear now because my legs got too big again. So it goes the
Right.
other way. But I'd rather have that they're tighter than loose, not
For
that you have a
sure.
tent floating on your body. But,
Absolutely.
and also, it's not just how you feel necessarily, but the discipline as well. To be single digit requires tremendous discipline, as in you tracking everything and being on top of the cardio. And if you're abusing that, maybe that can have an impact on your performance. I know that if I want the best bench press, I probably shouldn't be doing burpees every day.
Right.
There will be a recovery effect on my shoulders and probably my elbows as well. And likewise, if I want the best lower body performance for squats and deads, and that's very important in a natural bodybuilding context, well, I shouldn't be a hybrid athlete at single digit. I shouldn't be doing jogs twice a day, even though I feel amazing doing it. Like my cardio I should have competed in a marathon, double down,
Wow.
natural bodybuilding, and go for a run because I felt that good, like in terms of the cardio aspect. But you're not going to maximize your muscle gains doing that. There's
Of
levels to this
course.
hybrid stuff, right? You want to be in a
Yes.
reasonable body fat zone. And I guess I wanted more performance, even though I was able to somewhat sustain that look. And I stayed that way for a good month and a half before the numbers started keeping back up. Because then it's like, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to stop tracking. Just eat normally. And when you do that, expect a rebound in fat gain. Not by much if you're doing it healthfully. I'm done with dirty bulking, but also expect your strength to climb in proportion, especially for movements that are weight dependent like the bench press. And now, like, I'm back to where I was supposed to be before I started this
Right.
cutting.
And this is an important thing that we have to touch on because there's going to be someone who is maybe thinking it and they're like, you should be asking that. When you were cutting last time, the last time you did your fat loss phase, when you got ready for your
Yeah.
competition, you were not doing vegan.
No,
Okay. Now, did your strength also decline like how it did this time?
it was worse.
Okay. So there you go. That just want to make sure. And I'm not,
Yeah, that's why I have
yeah.
experience on both ends, and I followed a very
Okay.
animal-based diet, you could say. I mentioned what it was before, but I think the reason is because the carbs were lower. If it would have been a more balanced
Ah,
approach, maybe it would have been fine.
similar
But
maybe.
the thing
Yeah.
is, how are you going to be in a calorie deficit, like to get shredded, if your carbs are through the roof, like I was doing on the plant-based diet, and also getting all your
Amino
vitamins and minerals?
acids.
You won't be able to do
Yeah.
it. You kind of have to sacrifice.
You have to combine the correct foods though to get the all nine essential amino acids. Is that correct? Like you have to make sure you're combining certain foods
The
to.
thing is, if you're eating a variety of foods, you're gonna get it. I'm not talking about a restrictive diet here. A lot of people think, it's some hippie diet, you're gonna go on a fruitarian approach or you're gonna restrict. Like I'm doing everything. I'm following more so a Dr. Furman, Dr. Greger approach. So I don't, for example, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn will say that you don't want to consume too much fat. Leave it at 10%, right? But I think natural bodybuilders have figured out that that's probably not the best approach. 15 to 20% is better for your hormones when you're single digit, right? So you will be consuming walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, and that goes a long way in hitting your micronutrients, right? And your vitamins your minerals like zinc, you're going to get all that, right? So I don't restrict my fat. I have cut out oil just because it's easier to get lean without it. It's unnecessary calories. So I'd rather blend, whole fat sources instead. But sometimes that too could be high in calories. Like an avocado, I stopped eating them towards the end of my cut. The thing is, it's like if I'm consuming sweet potatoes, beans, tofu, tempeh, and then also TVP, which is like isolated soy protein, and then I'm having my protein shake on top of it. It's like I don't care about the quality of the protein. It's all there.
You did whey as well, whey isolate as
No,
well, or
no, no,
no?
vegan
Oh, okay.
protein powder.
Oh, it's
So it's like
vegan. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right,
it's
right.
like a pea protein or soy protein. Any of those are
Got
good,
it.
you know?
How's your digestive tract with because I know some people they kind of shy away from these types of foods because they think that it can really negatively affect their digestion.
No, it's the opposite. No, look, last year, again, I keep making this comparison because they're two extremes, right? I couldn't even go to the bathroom on comp day, bro. And I read Dr. Lane Norton's book. I followed his protocol to the letter. And I even took the Senna laxatives because he says you don't want to take normal laxatives or else it's going to bloat up your gut. But what you do is you remove your fiber. In the last 3 days, you don't want fiber in your stomach. That's what he said in the book. So I'm like, okay, drop the fiber to nothing, take the Senna, and all should be good. Well, I was plugged up for 3 days, couldn't go. So I showed up on
Wow.
stage. If you notice, my vacuum wasn't as good as it could have been. It's because I couldn't release what was inside of me. It was all blocked up. Whereas when you're consuming 80 grams of fiber on 1,800 calories, it's impossible not to go. You will. So I didn't have
Right.
any issues with that. And by the time I was single digit, what was that, 6 months in? Your microbiome completely changes. You're used to it. I would say maybe the first 3 weeks of going plant based were a little bit different because you're killing off your gut bacteria associated with the animal products and you're replacing with all plant foods. And now you've doubled or tripled your fiber intake. But at some point, you just get used to it and then you're better than ever. And what I could say is that my girlfriend used to have really bad stomach issues, like horrible. And she switched to the plant based diet as well. And now she's just as good as me. She stole my microbiome in a sense because we eat the same foods. So I think it's the opposite of what people are talking about.
I was curious if maybe you've kind of followed this blood type diet, and I don't know if you have any takes on that,
Nah,
but oh, okay, all right. Because some people
no,
think
I don't
that
do that.
oh, because they're this blood type, they respond better to grains versus this one, and obviously
Look,
certain
I'm
foods. You're
I'm
not
I'm a
even following that.
Mediterranean man. I'm
Okay,
Greek and Italian. I grew up eating traditional foods that everyone else in my family had.
okay.
And listen, it's an evidence-based diet. I'm not following any fads here. I'm following the guidelines of the best nutritional experts in the world. Literally, I'm not the one who invented any of this stuff. I listen to them, I trust them, I trust my life with them. I trust my family members with it. And it seems to be working well. Everything that they talk about in their books and videos and podcasts, whatever, it's happening one to one to me and the people that I know. So I'll just keep rolling with it. If it wasn't gonna pan out the way they were saying it was, then maybe I would have changed my mind. It surpassed my expectations on every level, health and in the gym.
That's good, and maybe it helps some people or gets people
I
thinking
hope
and
so.
questioning. Yeah,
And you'll
yeah.
save a lot of money too.
That's true too. That's true too. Do you ever miss eating meat, or what was your main? Also, like, was there a specific reason you stopped outside of like maybe how you felt during the?
Yeah, well, look,
Yeah.
I like to be consistent in all aspects of my life. I consider myself to be a moral man. I want to do what's best for the world and stuff like that, right? I'm not a social justice warrior, but I think veganism is great for the animals, for the planet. And if it benefits us at the same time by eliminating a lot of diseases and maximizing our longevity and all that, then I'm all for it. And even though I could have a steak once in a while, that would probably be fine considering the way I eat. Do I really have to? Like, is it fine to kill once a year, quote unquote, if I don't need it? Like, it would be a
Mm.
guilty pleasure for no reason. I don't need it. So I think it's easier for me to just go all the way. And also, even if I was somehow a psychopath who didn't care whatsoever, it's irrelevant because by me going all the way into something, it ensures that I won't cheat. And that keeps me consistent. That's all I need. It's like someone who doesn't have chips in their house. It's better just not to have access to it. Or someone who was a
Yeah.
former alcoholic, you don't even have a sip of it. Well, I have the same approach with the vegan diet because I'll tell you this, the reason why I quit it in the first place, which was in 2018, I did it for 6 months straight, is because in my family there are hunters and I was offered deer meat. So I figured, okay, he killed it himself. It's clean, right? I'm not going to have any problems health wise. So let me just have it, which was a bad move to make because the moment I did, well, first of all, my gut couldn't even handle it because I hadn't eaten meat in that long, but it was so good. It was so tasty that I immediately switched back to eating animal products like
Oh,
that.
wow.
One meal was able to trigger it. So even if, I could get away with it, I'm not going to simply
Mm.
because what if it does make me want to go back? So ultimately, it's about I'm feeling amazing. It's the right thing to do. And it's to my benefit not to cheat at all because who knows what could happen. And I
Oh,
have a
man.
very addictive personality as well. So
Right.
that doesn't help.
Yeah. You're making the meat sound like sugar, man. Like, you know how people are addicted to high
Well, look,
fat, high sugar combinations, right?
my favorite thing to eat was steak and game meat. So that's why me
Right.
going vegan was a hell of a step. Like I didn't think I was ever going to do this. Like at 15 years old, my sister went vegetarian. I'm like, oh, come on. Look at that. Murphy's Law. You do what you got
And,
to do, right?
and your background, man. You're Greek Italian, so I mean that's a
I
meat is a
know.
staple. So that's
It's
interesting.
it's been a staple. Lamb, you know how it is, right?
Lamb,
I went
Easter.
fishing as a kid. I got hunters in my family, so I had
Yeah.
every incentive to eat meat, and I still chose to sacrifice it because I
Wow.
find it's worth it. For the first time in my life, like my blood pressure is perfect. I always had trouble with that. It would always vary, even when I was lean. Now I have like hunter gatherer levels. I've dropped my sodium down to 1,000 milligrams a day. I have no saturated fat. I bet my cholesterol is at fall. My girlfriend got hers tested. It's 60 nanograms per deciliter, basically heart attack proof.
Well, that's amazing, man. To
So I wonder
hear.
what mine's at. My girlfriend, she's plant based like me, but she's also pescatarian, like following a Adventist approach. In the Adventist health study, the pescatarians actually did live a year and a half longer, but I think they had a slightly higher cancer rate. So she follows that kind of diet. Basically the same as me. And we don't have fish in the house. If she goes out, she might have a poke bowl or something. Or if she
Ah,
goes to
okay.
her mother, she might have a thing of salmon, right? And she got her blood test done and everything was absolutely perfect. So she might have fish at most once a week. And her cholesterol was 60 nanograms per deciliter. Now, the optimal range to be heart attack proof is between 50 and 70. So I would assume I can say maybe if she was full on vegan, she'd have 50. It's possible, right? Now, in my case, I have no idea what my cholesterol is. I haven't done a blood test in a decade. But what I do know is that when I was following an animal based diet at 17 years old, my cholesterol was borderline high. Like they were ready to put me on statins. That's how close I was. And I was consuming a boatload of eggs every day, 8, just to start my breakfast. In addition to, a lot of red meat and cheese. And cheese is like the worst thing in terms of the fat content. So I followed a bro diet, you could say, that everyone said was healthy. And my cholesterol was through the roof for that age, considering the fact that I was like 165 with abs and I had the best physique in my whole school. I was a competitive track athlete. I did swimming. There's no one who had a body like me. And yet my numbers were elevated and my blood pressure was like 145 over 90 or something, or 145 over 80. It was awful. And the lowest I was ever able to get it was like 125, 120-ish. Or like let's say I would get the single digit body fat, then it would be low. But under normal circumstances, I always had trouble. Like my baseline would be normal, like 120, quote unquote. And that's not good enough, right? Because hunter gatherer societies, they have 110 over 70. And what I can tell you right now is that that's my new baseline. But the last time I got my blood pressure checked, it was 100 over 60. So I went from being a candidate who was elevated on the blood pressure to being on the lower side. And it's low, yet I don't feel like passing out. And I think one of the reasons for that would, of course, be the lower sodium intake. And what I didn't know up until recently, we hear you want to consume 1,500 milligrams a day. That's the optimal amount as to normalize your blood pressure. That's actually slightly higher than optimal. The reason why people don't want to recommend lower is because it's too difficult to adhere to, because it requires that you remove all external salt from your diet. And Dr. Furman was the one to point it out. He's like, I don't care about hurting people's feelings. I only care about the facts. And the facts are if you lower it to 1,000 milligrams a day, your blood pressure drops even more. So now I've adopted that approach and my numbers are perfect. Like no matter what, whether I'm bulking or cutting, it's just a stable low. So I'm like a hunter gatherer at this point because I followed the evidence. It's not about me. It's not about how I feel. I want to hear what the experts have to say.
Now that's a good philosophical base to make your approach or to have an approach off of, like people go off belief and feeling, but you're saying no, this is
Yeah,
kind of what's been proven via the evidence and there's some science to back
that's all
that
there
up.
is to it.
I haven't sifted through it, I haven't looked through that, but obviously you have me very intrigued now. Like I'm very curious about how,
Ah,
yeah, so this is quite interesting. Obviously I love meat. I come from a background like yourself,
of
Greek.
course.
Yeah, so you know how Easter can get, especially holidays.
Oh, Easter's a
But
mess.
it's a mess, right? So, but from what you're saying, it's very interesting, and it has me thinking for sure. But you mentioned the sodium, so like you don't salt any of your foods. Am I
No.
understanding that correctly?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm basically SOS free, which is salt, oil, and sugar. Sugar I dropped out years ago. I don't remember the last time I added external sugar. I just don't. And if I want something to be sweeter, I just blend up dates, man. It's that simple. But salt, that was also a hard one for me because, Italian family with the Parmesan cheese, and my mother would salt everything, bro. Even with the salad. First of all, you know how it is in Italian households, they oil everything. And even though olive oil is good for you, it's still a lot of damn calories, right? So literally, they're just dumping the whole bottle. You go through a bottle a week practically. So oil everywhere, which jacks up your calories, and then salt. So that was me my whole life, in addition to the cheese, which is probably where I indirectly got it. And then I would also salt my meat and whatever. And so I think that's why I had issues with my blood pressure. But now I dropped it completely. I use Mrs. Dash and the Costco one. And you know what? It's true what they say. Your body does adapt. Again, I thought that was impossible. Nowadays, foods taste the same as when I was salting. Like, it's very strange. Like, my favorite snack when I was a kid was chips. And I recently bought a pack of chips, to watch a movie. And I'm like, God damn, these are so salty. I can't handle this anymore. So I can't finish the pack of chips anymore. I got to put it away because it's overwhelming. And then it's like 2 hours later, I'm really thirsty. So
The salt thing though with with the chips, that's funny because that's one of the hardest things to chuck out of a diet if that's something that's consistently in your diet. It's either in or it's out. It can't be kind of like it's like your foot's a little bit in the water, but not really. It's like, no, man, you're
yeah,
either in or out with that. I find at least with the chips, I think there's like some sort of
yeah,
addictive
we
something is
all,
so the crunch to it something, it's like
man, we all got our cheat snacks. Some people it's
yeah,
chips, others it's popcorn, some it's ice cream. For me, I was
right,
never
right.
a sweets guy. It was salty, fatty things.
Okay.
And chips were my go-to for years. Now it's like I'm good not eating them for the rest of my life.
I would love if you could break down for the listeners, if you're cool with that, what's your day in the life of eating? What does that look like from breakfast to, let's say, when you go to bed?
Sure. So it does vary day to
Okay.
day because I like to keep things fun and exciting. And that's funny. When you go plant-based, you actually will have more variety because otherwise it can get kind of stale, right? But essentially, first of all, every Sunday I prepare a batch of beans for the week, which will last about 5 days. And this consists of chickpeas, black beans, and kidney beans. And I do it in the pressure cooker, about 1,000 grams dry. And I split that with my girlfriend as well. So we both consume the same thing. Now, breakfast is typically going to be a large bowl of oatmeal with berries, chia seeds, flax seeds, and walnuts. And I might have a protein shake to go with it. Lunch is typically going to be a large salad. My preference is arugula. There will be raw onion, some mushrooms as well, because it's anti-angiogenesis, which is the promotion of new blood vessels. So it's anti-cancer, you could say. There's also going to be garlic in there. So garlic and onions, you can't beat that combo. There might be some quinoa mixed in as well, in addition to the beans that I had prepared. So it's always a large salad of sorts. That's where the hemp seeds will go on as well. I'm not doing hemp in my oats. I'm doing it in my large salad. So that would be a simple lunch. Again, I may or may not have a protein shake to go with it. Usually no. Oh, and with the breakfast, I also throw in raisins sometimes. And then supper, it's usually going to be a heavy starch-based meal. I might have 500 grams of sweet potatoes alongside more beans, which again can be some of the leftovers that I had for lunch or a different kind, or it can be a lentil of some kind. So I like red lentils, green lentils, and brown lentils. I could mix that with rice if I want. I could have it with pasta. And if it is going to be like a straight grain like that, it's usually going to be mixed in with a fat based sauce that comes from Whole Foods. So I might blend up some walnuts with some soy milk and also throw in some garden vegetables like Swiss chard and kale. So that's also where I'm getting my greens in. I'll blend it as a sauce, and then you're pouring that on top of your rice or your potatoes or whatever. So that's like your oil substitute. And then if I feel like it, I could have another meal, which could be whatever I want. It could be just another kind of supper that's either the same thing or something slightly different. I'm also eating fruits throughout the day as I
Okay.
see fit. That's like my snack.
That's what I was just about to ask about I was gonna ask about the fruits. So you'll just kind of chuck those in where you feel like you need it or
Yeah, if I
feel
if
like
I if
it.
I feel
Yeah.
like having, if I just had a coffee, I might have an apple to go with it as well, or I might have some kiwis or oranges or
Yeah.
whatever. If I'm about to work out, I might have a couple bananas, they get sprinkled in. But the thing is,
Gotcha.
I find the berry is most important. As long as you're getting that every day, you're pretty much good. Oh,
Yeah.
and also in the supper, I use this thing called TVP. So it's like a ground beef substitute. It's like a soy protein isolate, and you can mix that in your rice. And I always put curry powder in my rice, by the way. So even more, I'm going hard, right? So you can have like this sauce that you made. You got your rice, you got your lentils, you got beans additional with your garden vegetables, and then you got the TVP mixed in there, which helps a lot. And occasionally, if it's not just going to be beaned out like that, I can replace it for tofu, which I have tofu maybe 4 times a week. I buy the pack from Costco in bulk. It's the organic kind. So that's in my rotation, as well as tempeh, which is like a more fermented version. But that's always going to be for a supper. And if I
Yeah.
have leftovers next day, I'll have it. But that's basically how I eat. And the potatoes get rotated. The sweet potato is the best one, but I'll have some white potato. I'll have some yuca, which is a staple in Costa Rican cuisine. I make a lot of soups as well. So I maybe do like 3 soups a week, and where I'm
Cool.
combining all kinds of vegetables and beans and grains and stuff like that. So it's a very healthy diet, and it's not your typical bodybuilding diet, you know?
No, no. You're like a chef, man, in dinner time. You got the menu pulled out. You gotta make sure it's all prepped out in a nice way, or
That's
else I
it.
feel like it won't be as satiating, right? Versus like maybe back in the day, you could just throw a steak on the grill, maybe you chuck a
That's
potato
it.
in the oven, and that's what that looked like, right?
It was a lot simpler.
Yeah,
You gotta get more creative with this.
right.
But,
Cool, man.
I prefer this. It's fun, and it's
Yeah.
very tasty too. So
Okay. And post-workout, do you feel like you need to have anything specific, or is it just what you mentioned? Maybe
well,
that's what it
usually
looks
I
like.
I I work out right before supper. So
Okay.
the post-workout is like timed
Nice.
well. And
Yeah,
if it's
yeah.
late, then it'll be my second supper, which again will be a repeat kind of meal or a slight twist on it or something completely different. I could even be lazy if I really want, stab a bunch of potatoes and just stick in the microwave. But like
True.
just
True.
have that in a protein shake and you're fine.